and welcome to Season 6 of Business Mentorship Keepin' It Real. Introducing corporate leaders who have taken the leap to business owner, introducing their great idea in our guest blog, found on shareyourstories.online. Our guest joins us from Hartfield, Virginia. Susan Brady is a Doctor of Integrative Medicine, physical therapist, and nutritionist who is helping people regain movement and strength. Let's find out how Susan is helping people heal from the inside out and why she created the Bones Method. It is my pleasure to introduce everyone to Susan.
Hi, Trish. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I have to say, when I was reading your story, I was completely intrigued by the fact that you started your career in physical therapy. How did you become interested in the science of the body?
Yeah. So I've been a physical therapist since 1989. So over
Long
30,
time.
yeah, over 35 years now. And it was very early on in my career. I was working for a doctor who was a rheumatologist, so saw a lot of patients with rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory diseases. And this one patient that kind of sparked my interest in nutrition and integrative health. I was helping her temporarily. She'd get relief from physical therapy, but she never really turned that corner. And she just stopped coming. And I was like, okay, I
What
guess.
happened?
Yeah, I saw her in the doctor's office one day and I went up to her and I asked her how she was. And she said, I'm doing great. And she told me that she stopped eating sugar and wheat and it completely changed everything.
Wow.
Was no longer having pain and swelling in her hands and her joints. And you have to understand, this was like 1990. So we didn't really connect food
Right.
with our health or our body or even pain.
Right.
So that really sparked an interest in me and like, wow, there's something more than just, us physically working on our patients. So then I went on and got a Doctor of Integrative Medicine. And it was actually the nutrition piece that really interested me the most in that program, though we did learn a lot about, how stress affected our health, how sleep affected our health. So I then went on and got an advanced master's degree in nutrition and integrative health. And so when I kind of put my shingle out there and started working with people, I became inundated with women with osteoporosis. And they were being diagnosed with osteoporosis. The doctor said, hey, you need to go on this medication. They would go to Dr. Google. Dr. Google would tell them all of the horrible
Mhm.
side effects from these medications, and they wanted to try a more holistic approach before resorting to these medications. So then that's when I really dove into osteoporosis and, perfect match, physical therapy, because obviously exercise, posture, balance, everything we do in physical therapy is absolutely essential for women with osteoporosis, as well as then the nutrition and the holistic approach. So I started reading everything I could possibly read on osteoporosis. And what I came to realize was there were 5 key factors, and that's where my Bones method comes from. And Bones is an acronym: B, balanced nutrition; O, optimized digestion and gut health; E, or N, nurture the soul with stress reduction and sleep; E, essential exercise; and S, smart supplementation. So that is now the framework that I both evaluate all my patients as well as treat all my patients.
You know, it's such a wonderful journey that you're able to describe, from being in a clinical practice in obviously larger organizations, and then you referenced hanging out the shingle. What
Mhm.
was the inspiration to hang out the shingle? Because you spent a significant amount of time, energy, and money on education in being able to feel comfortable with coming up with this wonderful approach. So, what made you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Well, back in the early 90s, not a lot of people were talking about integrative health and integrative medicine. So,
Right.
there wasn't a practice that supported what I did.
Right.
They wanted either a pure physical therapist or a dietitian. And so I wasn't either. And, also being a mom with young children, really important to have that flexibility of being
Sure.
able to have your own business, run your own business, flexible hours.
Sure, for sure. Now, in your current practice, I mean, do you deal with, what would you say the percentages of dealing with people online and dealing with people in person? What would be the ratio?
So I would say right now, probably 80-20 online to in person. And
Mhm.
and actually COVID really helped me in that way because
Sure.
if you look at my clientele, they do tend to be older.
Mhm.
And um so they were all learning how to do telehealth and telemedicine during COVID.
Sure.
So sometimes when I go into my office, I'll have somebody right down the street and they would rather do, we do
Online.
secure telehealth internet connections. They would rather do online than come see me in person. And I think, during COVID, we all got so used to
Right.
being online, and it was kind of fun because I would teach people how, back then it was we didn't have all these secure telehealth
Sure.
communications. We were using mostly Zooms. And they would say to me, "Can I Zoom with my grandson?" I'm like, "Absolutely." "Can I Zoom with my Bible study?" "Absolutely." So I almost felt like not only was I helping them physically, I was helping them emotionally too, because
Right.
for that older generation, they were very secluded back then because a lot of
For
them did
sure.
live alone, and
Mhm.
now they can't see their grandchildren, they can't see their family, they can't see their friends. So I felt like I was doing, a
Double
service
duty.
to help them stay connected to the world during that time. And
Sure.
now, telehealth is so easy and I see people from all over the country, and it just works really well.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned is stress reduction. And I know that in, our current economic and global situation in terms of world news and things of that nature, stress is really becoming a hot topic again. Like we think that it's something that's sort of been flying under the radar, but I think under the circumstances, and too, you mentioned people who live alone are looking for some really practical ways to relieve stress. So,
Yeah.
can you share with our viewing and listening audience something that you may share with your parents or your patients from stress reduction? Because
Mhm.
we've all heard, "Oh, well, take yourself out of the situation." Well, seriously, that's a little bit impossible to do. We all live in this current global economy. So, how do we do that?
So I think there are a couple things. One, we have to look at stress as it's not all bad actually,
Right.
because stress can actually motivate us to do things that are important for us. But we also for me it's kind of a you got to switch in your mind, because it's your perspective on what's happening that is more important. A tree could fall on your house and you could get upset, "Oh my gosh, a tree fell on my house." Or you could say, "Hey, I can get a new roof now."
Right.
Right? Um,
Right.
so I do think a lot of it is how we frame the stress. But stress isn't going anywhere. So we do need a toolbox to handle stress when it comes our way. And I actually do give out a guide on putting together your own toolbox. Things like breathing. Breathing is so important. And there are many different kinds of breathing. There's box breathing and and the different sequences of breathing. I think exercise is awesome as a stress reduction. Go out for a walk. I also think things like meditation. There are so many apps out there these days that you
Sure.
can use. And the one that I really like is Insight Timer. And the reason why I like that one is because you can do a 5-minute meditation, you can do a 60-minute meditation. So they have them, all different times, all different things you want to work on. So it's easy just to pop in a meditation, for 5 minutes and just
Sure.
calm the body and calm the soul.
Yeah, and I think that's really great advice, because the things that you've actually mentioned to us are available to each and every one of us. Going for a walk, monitoring our breathing, those are just things that we have to integrate into everyday life, right?
Yes, yes, definitely.
And they don't cost anything. All they do, as you say, is reframing our attitude and taking a new look and a different perspective. It's the triggers, I think, that we need to be able to recognize, right? Whatever triggers us to be stressful, that's when it have to ignite the tool from the toolbox that's best suited for that.
And I think that we all have a very good idea of what our triggers are.
Yeah, for sure.
And people that have difficulty sleeping at night, the very first thing I say is turn off the TV. Because
Yeah.
if you're listening, like you said, to the news,
The news.
that's enough to trigger any one of us, and you're not going to sleep.
That's
So
right.
learning what your triggers are, and unfortunately, triggers can also be people. So, making sure that you have good boundaries, or if you know that you're going to be with somebody that may trigger you, go in with a good mindset. Um, a lot of times in physical therapy, we would have patients that would kind of drain your energy. And I would learn that quickly on when I was treating them. And I would just wrap myself in an imaginary bubble and go in to treat them. And that way, their negative energy couldn't penetrate me. So,
That's so true.
learning tricks like that, I think, is really important.
Yeah. And I think, and one leads to the other. What I love about your acronym is one thing naturally progresses to the next,
Mm.
discipline in the word bones, right? Because nutrition, I think we forget, and things change as we age, right? So the
Mm.
food that we used to be able to eat in our teens and our 20s and our 30s, they probably no longer serve us in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? So we need to be able to identify some of the things that have changed in our eating habits that
Mhm.
are also a direct reflection of how we feel and how we show up, right?
Well, I don't think they serve us in our teens and our 20s either, these
Either, yeah, we just don't notice it.
our body's more resilient when we're
Right.
younger, and it can take bad food and process it a little bit better
Sure.
than it can as we get older. And when we talk about bone health actually starts in our adolescent years,
Right.
because that is the time that we are building bone, and we are going to build the most bone we're ever going to have by the time we're about 28 in women, about 30 in men. And so, more young adults need to understand that taking care of their bones is cool. And unfortunately, with so many young female athletes who feel, thinner is better, or even non-athletes, and society is telling everybody that we have to be bone thin. And that is actually going to be detrimental later in life when it comes to your bones.
Sure. That's so true. I remember being at a conference, and it was with a skincare line. I was in the retail business at that time. And I remember the lady saying, well, your wrinkles start at 21. And I was sitting there thinking, geez, Louise, like I'm doomed already. Here I am, in my late 20s, and I'm already getting, you're telling me that my aging process has already started. Like I feel like I'm just getting started in life. So, that's really good advice for people to realize that the things that we do in our youth
Hmm.
have are a direct reflection on our abilities, our skill levels, our management tools, our health as we age,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So if you had to give somebody a little piece of advice, like in terms of, I remember when I was doing personal training, I integrated that into my practice, because health and wellness, as you say, was not something we spoke about in the 90s.
Right.
Didn't become vogue till the 20s, right?
Mhm.
If you had to give you, so if you were a team leader and you had a bunch of people who were reporting to you, and you're sitting in that team meeting, and you can look around the table and see those faces and go, oh geez Louise, everybody looks really stressed, and can't wait for the weekend. Is there some piece of advice that you not only give to your clients, but that would be helpful for a leader to give to his team that would help them with their lifestyle choices?
Mhm. So I think you have to stay healthy in order to build your dream, right? Because if you're sick and you're tired and you're stressed, you're not going to be able to have the energy and the strength and the creativity to build your entrepreneur dream. So I
Right.
think, moving, when you're running a business, you can't stay glued to your desk for hours, because your bones, your muscles, your mind need that movement. So one of the things, if I was a team leader, I would, encourage my people to set timers to get up and walk, even if you're, brainstorming while you walk. So it's not like you're not working, but get up and just walk around the building or go up and down stairs. Think while you're exercising. Every time you get up and down from your chair to go to the restroom, do a couple up, stand up and sit down a couple times, do some
Right.
squats, because your body and your mind thrive on motion. And even small bursts of movement are going to help not only keep your body going, but also, get those, um, the blood flow to your brain as well. And then,
You know,
obviously, like we talked about, nutrition, fuel. You have to fuel yourself. If you put, often would tell my clients, if you were to put Diet Coke in your car, how long would your car run, right? It needs gas, and food is our gasoline, and we have to fuel ourselves right in order to be, for our mind to work. So, making sure that you're getting nutritious foods. Um, possibly even having nutritious snacks in the break room instead of, candy bars. Think about how often you walk into somebody's office and they have a bowl of candy there. In fact, I know when my kids were young, I would send all the Halloween candy into the office with my husband because I didn't want it in my house. So,
yeah.
having good quality nutrition bars and lots of water and things like that. So, we really need to prioritize whole foods rich in protein and calcium, to keep our energy up, but keep our mind going. And then,
That's great advice, because I think, one of the things, the water cooler way back in the 60s, when you think about, we've all watched these sitcoms or programs on TV, and there was so much conversation happening around the water cooler. It wasn't the water cooler that was really important. It was the interaction that people were getting up from the desk. Obviously drinking water was important, but it was a community place to almost inspire great ideas, right? And now
right.
that we're in isolation,
Mhm.
most people are working in home offices, I
Right.
think we tend to forget to pick the head up and say, wow, it's sunny out there. Maybe I should take a 15-minute break and go for a walk,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And just the sunshine alone. I mean, we are all so scared, or have been, thought to be scared of the sun because of sun cancer and wrinkles and
Yeah.
all that. The
Yeah.
sun is our friend. We need that sun. We get energy from that sun. So, get up, get outside. Even sun in your eyes are going to help the circadian rhythm and make you feel better during the day. And you're right, a lot of people probably just roll out of bed, get their cup of coffee, sit down at their desk and start
Yeah.
their day without taking time to nourish themselves with
For
proper
sure.
food, a little bit of exercise, some sunshine.
Yeah.
And then
Very important.
the last thing is, you're no good to anyone if you're sleep deprived, stressed, um, worry. So I think prioritizing sleep is absolutely essential too, because sleep is when our body repairs itself, our brain repairs itself, our brain consolidates everything from the day before into our memory banks. Our body rebuilds itself. So I think really focusing on prioritizing sleep is so important. Putting together, some kind of a sleep ritual where you turn off the computer and all of your electronics at 8 o'clock, you read a book, you take a bath. If you are going to watch something on TV, make sure it's fun and uplifting, not
Right.
scary.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time every morning. We know all of those things are really, really
Important. Yeah.
important, um, for your body and for your bones, because your bones rebuild at night too. And there have been a ton of studies that show that people that don't sleep well are more, tend more to have bone loss and osteoporosis. And again, the circadian rhythm is so important, because what we've also seen in bone health is people that work these night shifts. So they're up during the night and sleeping during the day. They tend to have a higher risk of bone loss and osteoporosis than people who actually, have a normal sleep-wake cycle.
Right. Now, that just segues beautifully into, we always ask folks to share 3 words of advice in our guest blog. And so what I'd like you to do is maybe just give us a quick overview of why these 3 words of advice are so important to you. Fuel, flow, and flourish. Now, you've given us some great information on fuel. So how does flow and flourish sort of tie the whole thing together?
Right. So flow is movement. And in my opinion, movement is medicine. And, in terms of osteoporosis in particular, yes, nutrition is important, but exercise is actually even more important than nutrition when it comes to bone health, because we need that exercise not only to maintain muscle strength, but also to maintain that bone strength. And your bones are going to follow your muscles. So the stronger your muscles are, the stronger your bones are going to be. But movement isn't all about exercise. It's about, every day getting up and doing something to stay strong and flexible and pain-free as we age. And balance too, because balance is critical when, when it comes, in regards to osteoporosis and bone health. The whole idea is to prevent fractures, and to prevent fractures, we have to prevent falls.
Right.
And as we're all aging, none of us want to end up in a wheelchair or being dependent on our loved ones. And so exercise, in my opinion, is the key to staying independent as we age.
Perfect. Well, you've certainly given us some really wonderful things to think about. And I know that our viewing and listening audience have been taking notes on some of this great advice. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today and sharing not only your wisdom, but giving us some really practical tools that we can use in our own personal toolbox. So thank you so much for joining us, Susan.
Thank you, Trish. It's been a pleasure.
To our viewing and listening audience, I want to thank you for joining us today for this edition of Keeping It Real, introducing you to the person behind the logo. If you'd like to connect with our guest, you'll find Susan's contact information in the description portion below. I'm Trish Tonai, author, artist, and the founder and host for the series, and we invite you to share your business story. Just visit our website at shareyourstories.online and subscribe to our channel, Business Mentorship, Keeping It Real. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting you next time when we share another great idea.